Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. When my husband and I purchased our home 2 years ago, we were drawn to its unique charm and the peaceful suburban community. The house sat at the edge of the neighborhood with a gorgeous backyard that included a pergola-covered patio and a small koi pond. The real estate agent had emphasized that despite being part of the homeowners association, our property had a special feature. A slice of land extending beyond our fence line that connected to the community green space but was fully part of our deed. Just be aware, she'd warned, gesturing to the beautifully landscaped path that ran alongside our property. Some neighbors might assume this is community property, but your survey clearly shows it belongs to you. We didn't think much of it at the time. My husband and I are both fairly private people, but we're not unreasonable. We maintained our property meticulously, paid our HOA dues on time, and generally kept to ourselves while being friendly with the neighbors. Within the first few months, I started noticing strange things happening on that side path area. Garden lights would be moved. The decorative bench would be in a slightly different position. Once, I even found a coffee mug abandoned on the ground near the koi pond. Someone's been using our property, I mentioned to my husband one evening after finding fresh footprints in the mulch we'd just laid down. Probably just kids taking a shortcut, he shrugged. No harm done. But then I met her. Madam President, as I came to think of her. She'd been the HOA president for 15 years, and the way she carried herself, you'd think she was running a small nation rather than a suburban neighborhood of 85 homes. Our first interaction occurred at the annual summer block party. She approached me with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've noticed your garage door has been open past 8 p.m. twice this month," she said instead of introducing herself. Section 17, paragraph 4 of our bylaws clearly states all exterior doors should be closed by sunset or 8 p.m., whichever comes first. No hello, no welcome to the neighborhood, just straight to violations. "I wasn't aware," I replied politely. "We'll be more careful." "See that you are," she responded, already making a note on her clipboard. "First written warning will be issued if it happens again." A neighbor who witnessed the exchange approached me afterward. "Don't take it personally," he whispered. "She's like that with everyone. Last year, she delayed my shed approval for 3 months because the color was questionable but then got her own pool house approved in a week with the exact same color scheme. I laughed it off, but over the next few months, I heard more stories. How she entered backyards unannounced for inspections. How she had single-handedly changed the playground equipment without proper board approval. How she used her position to prioritize neighborhood improvements that benefited her property value first. I might have continued ignoring all this if not for what happened 6 months into our residency. I work from home 3 days a week, and one Wednesday afternoon I decided to take my lunch outside to enjoy the spring weather. As I approached our side patio with my sandwich, I froze. There, beneath our pergola, sat Madam President with 2 other women. They had a spread of food on our patio table and were clearly in the middle of some kind of meeting. I stood there for a moment, wondering if I was hallucinating. They hadn't noticed me yet, and I could hear snippets of their conversation. "We'll need to increase the landscaping budget for the front entrance," Madam President was saying. "My contact can do it for just 20% more than last year." One of the other women nodded. "Your patio is such a perfect meeting spot. So much more pleasant than that stuffy community center." My patio. They were calling my private property their meeting spot. I cleared my throat loudly, and all 3 women turned to look at me. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Madam President barely registered surprise. "We're just finishing up an HOA landscape committee meeting," she said, as if that explained everything. "On my private property?" I questioned. She waved her hand dismissively. "This has always been a community space. The previous owners allowed neighborhood functions here all the time. I'm sorry, but this is definitely private property," I insisted. "Our deed and property survey clearly show that this entire area belongs to us." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm the HOA president. I have authority to access all areas for official HOA business. This particular spot has traditionally been used for small committee meetings." "Tradition doesn't override property rights," I pointed out, my sandwich forgotten. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave, please." The other 2 women looked uncomfortable, gathering their things quickly, but Madam President remained seated. "You must be confused about your property lines," she said with a condescending smile. "This path area has always been considered community access. I've been president for 15 years, dear. I know exactly where the boundaries are." I took a deep breath. "I'm not confused, and while I'm happy to show you the documentation another time, right now I need you to leave my property." She finally stood, but not before giving me a cold stare. We'll discuss this at the next board meeting. You clearly don't understand how things work around here. After they left, I immediately called my husband, who suggested we verify our property lines again just to be absolutely certain. That weekend, we pulled out all our closing documents and confirmed what we already knew. The side path, pergola, and extended garden area were 100% ours. To be thorough, I contacted the county records office and requested an official copy of our plot plan. When it arrived, it confirmed our understanding perfectly. The previous owners had actually purchased that additional land parcel 5 years before we bought the house, specifically to create the garden pathway and patio area. Armed with this information, I ordered several tasteful private property signs and installed them along the boundary line. I also drafted a polite but firm letter to the HOA board, not just the president, clarifying the situation and attaching copies of the relevant documentation. 3 days later, my phone rang with an unknown number. "This is ridiculous," Madam President's voice spat before I could even say hello. "Those signs are an eyesore and violate Section 8 of the HOA bylaws regarding exterior decorations." "They're not decorations," I replied. "They're property markers which are explicitly permitted under Section 12. There was a momentary pause. She hadn't expected me to know the bylaws. "You're disrupting neighborhood harmony," she continued. "That path area has been used for small gatherings for years. You can't just come in and change established practices." "I understand this might be surprising," I said, keeping my voice level, "but the documentation is very clear. The previous owners may have allowed certain uses, but they never relinquished their property rights, and neither will we." "Remove those signs by Friday," she snapped, "or I'll be issuing violation notices that carry fines of $100 per day per sign." "That would be inappropriate," I responded. "I've already sent documentation to the full board. If you'd like to discuss this further, I suggest we do it with the entire board present." She hung up without another word. The next day, I came home to find all my signs missing. Our doorbell camera had captured Madam President herself removing them, placing them in her luxury SUV, and driving away. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be resolved through polite conversation. I contacted a real estate attorney who reviewed our documentation and confirmed our position. He drafted a formal cease and desist letter addressed to both the HOA president individually and the board as a whole, clearly outlining the property boundaries and warning against further trespassing. While waiting for the legal process to work, I took more immediate steps. We installed security cameras covering the entire property, particularly focused on the disputed area. My husband built a decorative border of potted plants that clearly marked our territory without violating any HOA rules about permanent structures. And in a stroke of inspiration, we installed motion-activated sprinklers that could be turned on when we weren't using the space ourselves. For about a week, things were quiet. Then, on a Saturday morning, our security system alerted us to movement in the side garden. I checked the camera feed to see Madam President leading a group of 5 people, including some board members, onto our property. They were carrying folding chairs and what looked like meeting materials. I watched via the camera as she pointed to various areas, clearly giving some kind of tour or presentation. I heard her say, "As you can see, this has always been used as a community space. The new owners are being difficult." That's when I activated the sprinklers. The reaction was immediate and, I have to admit, somewhat satisfying. There were shrieks of surprise as everyone got sprayed with water. Papers went flying. Madam President's perfectly coiffed hair flattened against her head as she stood there in shock. I walked outside, remote control visibly in hand, and turned off the sprinklers. "I'm so sorry about that," I called out with exaggerated concern. "Those motion-activated sprinklers are for keeping deer away from my garden. I had no idea you were planning to trespass on my private property again after receiving our attorney's cease and desist letter." The board members looked from me to their soaking wet president, confusion evident on their faces. "Cease and desist letter?" one of them asked. "Yes," I replied calmly. "After the president here removed my private property signs and continued to use my land without permission, our attorneys sent a formal letter to the entire board. Didn't you receive it?" By their expressions, it was clear they hadn't. "This is outrageous," Madam President sputtered, water dripping from her designer outfit. "You deliberately assaulted us with those sprinklers." "Not at all," I responded. "I'm protecting my property from wildlife. You chose to enter private property without permission despite multiple warnings. That's trespassing, and I have it all on video." I gestured to the clearly visible security cameras. "Now I'm going to have to ask you all to leave immediately or I'll be forced to call the police to report the trespassing, and I'll be bringing this incident to the attention of the full HOA membership at the next meeting." The group quickly dispersed, with several board members shooting questioning looks at their president as they left. That evening, I received separate calls from two board members apologizing for the incident and asking for copies of the documentation I had regarding my property lines. Apparently, Madam President had never shared my initial letter with them. An emergency HOA board meeting was called for the following week. I arrived prepared with my attorney, multiple copies of all relevant documents, and a USB drive containing video evidence of the multiple trespassing incidents. The meeting room was packed. Word had spread about the sprinkler incident, and homeowners were curious to see what would happen. I presented my case calmly and factually, showing the property survey, deed records, and county documentation confirming my ownership of the disputed area. As you can see, I concluded, this is not a matter of opinion but of legal fact. The property in question belongs exclusively to us, and we have the right to control access to it. The board members looked uncomfortable as they reviewed the evidence. "Why weren't we shown these documents when they were first submitted?" one board member asked, looking directly at Madam President. Before she could answer, another homeowner stood up. "While we're on the subject of transparency," he said, "I'd like to know why my fence application was delayed for 3 months while the president's similar request was approved in days." This opened the floodgates. Suddenly, neighbors were sharing their own stories, approved modifications that violated bylaws, selective enforcement of rules, entering properties without permission, and using HOA funds for projects that primarily benefited certain areas, particularly near the president's home. Madam President's face grew increasingly red as the accusations mounted. Finally, she stood up, hands shaking. "I have dedicated 15 years to this community," she shouted. "I have kept property values high and maintained standards that make this neighborhood desirable, and this is the thanks I get." "Following the rules applies to everyone," I said quietly, "including you." "You think you can just move in here and change how things work?" she snapped at me. "You know nothing about running this community." "I know about respecting private property rights," I replied, "and apparently, so does everyone else except you." That's when she truly melted down. She began pointing at various homeowners, bringing up minor violations they'd committed years ago, threatening to review everyone's compliance history, and warning that property values would collapse without her leadership. The vice president finally intervened. "I think we need to take a short recess," he announced, gesturing for several board members to join him in escorting Madam President from the podium. When the meeting reconvened, the board voted unanimously to formally acknowledge my property rights and boundaries, issue an official apology for the trespassing incidents, reimburse me for the legal expenses incurred, schedule a special election to replace the president who had been asked to step down for health reasons. In the aftermath, our neighborhood underwent a remarkable transformation. The new board instituted a much more transparent approval process. Rules were applied consistently. Board meeting minutes were actually shared with all homeowners. As for Madam President, she didn't move away as some expected. Instead, she became the neighborhood's most meticulous rule follower, perhaps hoping to demonstrate that she'd been right all along about the importance of strict compliance. 6 months after the incident, I was working in my garden when I noticed her hovering near the property line. "Can I help you?" I asked, setting down my trowel. She seemed to struggle with what she wanted to say. "Your hydrangeas, they're impressive. Mine never bloomed that vibrantly." I could have ignored her or given a curt response, but instead I said, "It's all about the soil acidity. Would you like some cuttings for your garden?" Her eyes widened slightly. "You'd do that?" "Of course," I replied. "Just make sure to ask before coming onto my property to collect them." I saw the corner of her mouth twitch, almost a smile. "Lesson learned," she said quietly. And it was. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about winning or revenge. It's about establishing boundaries that everyone can respect. In protecting my property rights, I helped restore something more valuable to our community: fairness. The next one is a malicious compliances story. Let me say up front, I loved my job in the barge towing industry. After 50 years in the industry, I have done it all, and done all of it almost every way possible. I know how long it will take to build tow, connect the barges together after clearing them out of the fleet moorings, but mainly I know the easiest and quickest way. Our story begins on a nice hot summer day. 3 barges to clear out for a refinery run to pick up product. I explain to the crew where our barges are in the fleet moorings, and my plan on how I will get them out to build the tow seems simple, right? I've done it multiple times before, but it's hot and keep getting feedback from one of the hands about how if we do it his way, it would take way less time. I know better and shut them down, and we do it my way. Takes about 90 minutes and away we go. Heard some grumbling from the crew about being a hard ass and not being open to new and better ideas. Heard it before and forgot about it. 2 weeks later, after returning to work, I get called into HR, well, what we had for HR at the time, about how I was inflexible and not open to new and better ways of doing things. I was told I should listen to crew, and perhaps I could learn some new and improved ways to towboat. The day arrives, get orders, same 3 barges to put together for refinery run, same deck crew, so let's try some HR advice on building tow. Ask the crew, how you guys want to do this. Tell them where the barges are and ask which one should we clear up first and where do you want to build the tow. 90 minutes in, we have 1 barge cleared and temps are high 90s. Quiet Hand says on radio, "It didn't take this long last week." I said someone went to office and said I was taking too long and would not listen to better ideas. Do you guys have any more? Let's take 10 for a water break and we get back to finishing. After the break, the crew came up and admitted their way was taking longer and could we just get it over with and do it your way. I asked just to be sure I did not do anything to disrupt your plan or make it harder. I don't want to be called into the office again next week for not giving you guys a chance. Took another 60 minutes to finish and get underway, told the crew to cool off and we will have a meeting about what happened. I explained if they wanted before every job, we could have a little informal meeting to discuss what I was planning, and I could accept their input before we started. They thought that was a great idea, except that was a form of work and the meeting slowly went away. A few years after this incident, one of the alphabet agencies that regulate and tell us how to do our jobs made those meetings mandatory and they had to have paper forms filled out in duplicate. Retired 3 years ago, I miss the work and many of the people I worked with. It's a great career for the right person, willing to watch, learn, and never be at home for long periods of time. The next one is a pro-revenge story. So, several years ago, my friend, we'll call him Boris, and I would always help each other do the spring cleanup for our properties. This included taking out damaged trees, preparing garden plots, and taking care of our weed-infested yards. I was going to be first on the cleanup detail, so I prepared tools and implements the Friday before the big cleanup was to happen. Sharpening tools and chainsaw chains, lawnmower blade, and just getting everything in order. Among those tasks was mixing had with 2-cycle oil, finished up kind of late and generally put things away for the next day. The next morning, Boris shows up with coffee and biscuits around 8 a.m. As we were sitting on his tailgate enjoying breakfast, my neighbors ride by in their beat-to-hell Chevy Cavalier smoking like a freight train. We will call them Rocky and Bullwinkle. Boris and I made the usual jokes about the amount of smoke pouring from the exhaust. Damn, bet they go to the gas station and fill up with oil and check the gas. We soon finished breakfast and thought no more about it. As we begin to get the tools laid out and has out a plan of attack, I cannot find my gas cans. No mixed gas, regular gas, or a gas can in general. That's when it dawned on us why the car Rocky and Bullwinkle were driving was smoking so bad. I'm pissed to say the least. Well, all Boris and I could do was go shopping for gas cans, gas, and more 2-cycle oil. After we returned, we saw Rocky and Bullwinkle pass by several times, but all in all, we got a lot done. The next weekend we dedicated to clean up at Boris's. A weekend or two go by and we have a family dinner at my wife's, Rocky and Bullwinkle's grandparents'. Toward the latter part of the evening we were having a few drinks. Most people had left and myself and wife's grandfather were shooting the breeze when I had to take a leak. As I was doing so, I saw a gas can with very distinct paint on it. I inquired from the old man about how it came into his possession and he stated Rocky and Bullwinkle left it there. I simply explained it was mine as was another and loaded them in my truck. It ate at me every time that Pa's car with my post neighbors went by, so I hatched a plan from a rotten egg. I went and bought a few gallons of gas, a few gallons of diesel fuel, and some other various oils. I made a concoction of these different chemicals and filled my new 6-gallon gas can I had to purchase. With some clean gas, I filled the lawnmower and cut some grass that evening, making sure Rocky and Bullwinkle saw me. Then I put everything away but forgot and left that rotten egg gas can out. I got up and went to work the next morning and didn't even think to check on the can. But when I got home, I checked and it was gone. My wife informed me that my plan must have worked as she watched Rocky and Bullwinkle go in and out with the car, not only smoking but spitting and sputtering as well. The last time they rode out, they didn't ride back in. They gave me about an hour of peace before they came over and wanted to know if I could look at the car and see what was wrong. If it could not be fixed on the side of the road, maybe tow it home. My response? I've had a long day and have a migraine. Maybe tomorrow. I saw the panic set in when I told them that. That's when they told me they had no insurance and it was on a main road. Tough luck. So the highway patrol did run across it and had it towed. It was going to cost them around $500 to get it out of impound, plus they had to have current registration and insurance. Car wasn't worth it. Well, there are those type of people that good luck just falls on them, and the pastor for a local church gave them an old Fortaurus. Took me a few cans of rotten egg gas, but I got the motor to lock up after about a month. This time it quit in their grandparents' yard, so they scrapped it, and as luck would have it, they got their income tax returns. They bought a nice-looking Ford F-150, but it began having problems too. Smoked really bad. They did take it to a mechanic that eventually found the problem. He got the truck running right again for about $1,500, and I have never had any more gas come up missing. Thanks for reading. The next one is an entitled people story. For context, I, F19, did a year abroad where I met a girl I'll call E, F21. We got close very quick, but I was in a bad place at the time, and I realized being friends with her was making it worse. I was in active addiction at the time, and she fed me drugs because I was more fun that way. She had a very codependent relationship with me and had a full-on mental breakdown when I returned to my country. She's also very mentally ill, has never held down a job for over a month, and is very irresponsible financially. I helped her a lot with money. I spent over $2,000 helping her with rent/groceries. As for now, a month ago she decided, without telling me, that she was going to move to my country. She had met a man online who lives an hour away from me and thought it could be nice as she would be able to be close to me and him. I told her that I didn't think it was a good idea as rent is extremely expensive where I live, and the man she met online still lived with his parents and also didn't have a job. She didn't listen to me, booked a plane, and came here. As she arrived, she managed to spend all her savings, which were not a lot to be fair, on Ubers and drinks at the club. She came over to my place a week ago to eat and was on the phone with her boyfriend fighting the whole time. They allegedly broke up because he thought she was irresponsible, and she decided that she was going to stay with me until she got an apartment. It's impossible to find an apartment in less than 2/3 months here, as she didn't have a place to stay anymore. I told her she could stay for a week max, but not more as I'm in law school, in exam period, and I need my space to focus. I also just don't like living with someone, and my parents, who are paying my rent, don't want to pay for someone else to live in my apartment. Now, she has been here for a week, eating all my groceries, bringing people over, doing drugs in my apartment even though I'm clean, not cleaning the place, etc. I told her she had to go and she called me names, saying I was a bad friend for letting her on the streets. I had to call her mom so she would pay for E to get a hotel and a plane ticket to go back home. I feel like a parent to someone who is 3 years older than me. Now we're not talking, she's been bad-mouthing me to all our friends, and I have to deal with her mom calling me every day to ask me to check on her poor girl. The next one is an entitled parent story. For context, I'm 22M, the oldest son of our mother with 2 brothers, 18, 13. We each have different fathers, and though I mostly lived with my paternal grandparents growing up, my brothers both lived with her. The story I'm going to tell will be about the 18-year-old who I'll call Jay for simplicity. Now our relationship with our mother has been strenuous at times, and it's become ever increasingly clear she's far from a saint. When she was with Jay's father, my aforementioned grandparents took note of the fact that I vehemently refused to go back to her house after visiting them. They told me they had to physically pry me away in order to get me to go, which they had to do legally. I lived with her then. One day I went to visit them and they noticed I had suspicious bruises on my body. Both my mother and Jay's father claimed it was from me playing rough with a dog. When they took me to a doctor to check it out, the doctor told them they could have only been caused by physical abuse, which is what led me to living with my grandparents. I didn't remember any of this, but had it explained to me much later when I was in high school, and made a lot of sense since when I was younger I would frequently flinch whenever people, such as my father, raised their hands for any reason. Now it had been years since that happened, so I didn't hold any ill will towards her for it, figuring she was just as much a victim of it, until one day she brought it up and revealed she still truly believed it was the dog. There was also her battle with alcoholism. I don't want to get too into it, given it's something she's gotten fixed, and I think it would be untactful to make fun of what was clearly a low point in her life. That said, I think it's important to note because it caused her to get into a lot of fights with our stepdad at the time, the father of the 13-year-old. Because I didn't live there, I only saw bits and pieces, but as you can imagine, my brothers had to live with it. With all of that said, the story this post is supposed to be about happened April, the week of the eclipse. I was visiting for the week and my mother had Jay take her car to come pick me up. Things were going fine for the first day or so, then it happened. Jay and his girlfriend were both at work while our mom was asleep. She worked the night shift. So I was in the living room watching YouTube or something. She came out of her room where she told me she was mad at Jay before she went back to sleep. Apparently he was supposed to refill the gas after he picked me up and he forgot to. I didn't think much of it at the time. He made a mistake. She'd probably call him out on it and that would be that. Later, when Jay got back home, we went out to his girlfriend's place to watch the eclipse. Then suddenly, I got a call from my mother asking to talk to Jay. I handed the phone over. I could hear my mother screaming from across the driveway while Jay, with the patience of a saint, tried to explain that he had made a mistake and apologized. And, as if flying off the handle at him wasn't bad enough, she told him she was going to take his car away, which, he needed to get to work. Mind you, she had given him the car not long before, but even so, that's still a majorly dick move. And illegal, I'm certain. And also, she was mad because she had to visit the gas station before work. But as far as I know, she wasn't even late to work, she was just in a rush. She made it on time. And yet she was insistent that he had somehow ducked him over. Jay, in a voice that made it clear this was far from the first time something like this had happened, told her in no uncertain terms that he was done dealing with her and was leaving. And indeed, when we got back, he immediately started packing up his things to go and live with his girlfriend, where he still lives today. While that was happening, she said that she wanted to go talk to Jay in private. I was, foolishly, hoping this would be her admitting to going to fair and apologizing. And though I wasn't privy to the conversation, she at least had the tact to not start yelling at him again, I feel confident that that wasn't the case. Once all was said and done and Jay was out of the house, she walked into the living room on the phone with Jay's girlfriend, evidently trying to get her to let her talk to him, but she wasn't letting her. At which point she started hurling insults at the poor girl, calling her a whore who was stealing him away from her. This grown-ass 40-year-old woman was yelling at a girl half her age because she wouldn't let her boyfriend's abusive mom speak to him. So, fast forward to today. From how I understand, Jay still refuses to speak to her, and good for him because he's braver than me. Unfortunately, I'm too afraid of conflict to be able to take a firm stance against her. I even went with her to Thanksgiving the other week just for the sake of not rocking the boat. That said, I have distanced her otherwise. I haven't visited her other than for Thanksgiving, and I've made it a point to not speak to her unless she contacts me first. Still, I know that I'm being too easy on her for what she did. I'm hoping the next time something like this happens, 'cause I just know it will, I'll have the balls to cut her off properly. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again.